Testing one, two, 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 testing, c'est toi? That's testing one, two, testing greetings. Oh, you say full? One now? Is it full? Testing one, two, testing one, two, testing one, two. Audible, quality is up. Okay, I get it.
Testing one, two, three. Testing one, two, three.
Okay. Oh, this. Okay. Oh, you need to. Okay. These things are very. Yeah. Testing.
Testing one, two, three. Testing one, two, three. Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Right, we're starting. Can we? Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I hope you're doing well. I guess it's still Happy New Year because it's the first time seeing you, so Happy New Year. Season's greetings, etc., etc. My name is Paman Damsongo. I'm Senior Programs Officer for the GDP, and I'm facilitating today's session. And we are excited to have you with us for this year. Of course, you all know we are having an interesting election that's going to be coming up. A number of different configurations of how political parties are looking to contest this year, and to what extent we're likely to end up in a coalition is going to be determined by the voter turnout that we're going to have. Having seen the two voter registration weekends help in sort of the registration process in terms of people coming up, we are still quite nervous as civil society that we don't have the full volume of people that we would like to see turn up at the polls to make this year's election significantly different from the past elections that we've had. Of course, as a non-partisan organization, all our work is about ensuring that citizens always have an opportunity to engage in the democratic process, to ensure that citizens have their voices heard in one way or the other. Whatever the result of the election is up to you as citizens, it's up to us as those who are voting. But as an organization, we will endorse the outcome if it's free and fair and credible and has the legitimate integrity associated with it. So we are excited to have you with us for this year, 30 years of South African democracy. But of course, across all of those lines, what we also have to consider and ponder on is the major political events that we've had. Of course, we had the January 8th statement, political parties that started to launch their manifestos. But interestingly, on the global stage, we've also started to assert our might in one way or the other. A political analyst was speaking and saying, it seems the African National Congress is trying to bring back its era of Mandela politics, in the sense that when we had a real global impact insofar as human rights and supporting institutions and countries where human rights were being challenged in that space. It was around the time of Mandela, but for the past couple of years, we've waned in our commitment somewhat. But of course, with the ICJ case, some are seeing it as a political ploy, some are seeing it as a legitimate stand, and so these are all of the things that we need to debate. Of course, broadly, that's what's happening in a sort of political space. But what we also want to be able to engage with in this instance is, what is the state of the nation as we understand it? Tomorrow, as with every February, every year, I think it's generally the second week of February, we have our State of the Nation address. And so we want to be able to understand what it is that you, as citizens of this country, understand about as the state of the nation as it is, and to what extent you're anticipating something innovative insofar as what the president himself will be announcing. As you would know, we are in election year, which means that we are blessed with having two State of the Nation addresses in 1 year. So if this president decides he wants to say something, but the next president we always have the assumption that administrations will change, people will change, that depending on how people vote. So perhaps if we have a new president after May, if the election is in May, how will that be different from what this president has talked about? And how do we assess whether either of these speeches that are given in Parliament actually reflect the true nature of the state of the nation? So broadly, contextually, these are the things that we've been pondering at DDP. And primarily then it's also about how do we ensure that throughout that process, whether it's a change of administration, whether it's coalition governing at a national level, or very slim majority for whoever ends up leading the polls, how do we ensure that citizens remain at the center of those priorities? How do we ensure that individuals who have cast their vote, individuals who pay taxes, individuals who work and toil for this country remain as a priority for the institutions that are serving our democracy? And so that's where we are. Of course, I, being just a lowly servant of the organization, I'm not permitted to officially welcome you. Umphathi uzongitshela ukuthi mhlambe nikhumula amabhanti-ke bese niyarelaxa-ke. I'm going to ask our executive director to welcome you officially on behalf of the organization, as well as our donor partners in this very important engagement around the state of the nation, the true state of the nation. Perhaps what's sometimes perplexing for us as citizens, or for us who practice in this space, is that people in general don't reflect on the different administrations, because we're in South Africa's sixth administration. Yes, we've been led by the ANC for the past 30 years, but there doesn't seem to be a genuine reflection between from one administration to the next. So how are things different? How are things better? How are things worse off? And so we need to be able to start thinking about what are the sort of things that go into giving a specific president or a specific administration a scorecard. What are the terms of engagement? What are the things that we prioritize as citizens? And how do we rate one president to the next as it relates to the work that needs to be done for the living in this country? Dr. Kariuki, please welcome, so you can welcome us officially. Round of applause, please.
Thank you so much, Brian. Good morning, colleagues. We're very, very thankful that you made time to come with us for this first engagement of our work this year. Just to underscore that your support means a lot to us as an organization, and that we can always count on you to have this kind of conversations we want to start framing from the beginning of the year. And just to say that on behalf of our DDP board, our funders, Honorable Stepton, and all our partners, we really want to thank you again for showing your support as we start another very busy year ahead of us, not only just as an organization, but as a nation, as Brian has correctly put it, that we're going to, in the next couple of months, we're going to see a flurry of activities that will really be increasing in tempo, and a lot of engagements politically as we prepare ourselves to do the right thing, and that is to vote. And I would like just to believe that you've also registered to vote, and if you haven't done, please do what you need to do to get there, because that's an opportunity that we as citizens have to make the change that we want to see in our country. And everybody has an equal opportunity to do so. And so please, if you haven't done so, or you know people that haven't done so, be the person to encourage them to do that. Be as it may, I also want to thank our speakers, Professor Ngomizulu, who is here from us from Canada. Thank you so much, Prof, for making time in your busy schedule to be with us. I'm sure now this is a family affair. And we're so very grateful. Also, Dr. Nabi, for also making time to come. Thank you very much. And I'm sure at some stage we're going to be connecting to Krista Duncan at some stage to discuss some of the conversations to come from this room. As Brian correctly said, we are very excited as DDP as we start launching this entire program for the year. This is one of the many forums that we're going to have. I think we've planned a couple of them, about 7 or so. And we also have our annual conferences in between the year. So we're going to do a lot of interaction. Most of these, I must say, that are related one way or another on our citizens' capacities and civil society engagements with electoral processes and political leadership of our nation. So be prepared to have a great engagement with us around these topics, and they'll be communicated in due course. And we're going to have, as well, supported by high-level community dialogues. As you know, we just don't convene in this room only or in these spaces only. We also have extensive partnerships with different communities across this metro and across the province. And some of the work that we're also going to do this year, we are extending to Eastern Cape. And we're going to work in Mpumalanga. And we're going to be doing some of this work in these provinces again because we are growing. And we are also attracting partners that are believing this vision and are willing to work with DDP. And so we're just starting to create these networks because we believe it's our contribution to our democracy in this country. And we also acknowledge that we cannot do this alone. So your partnership with us means a lot. And we're going to be calling upon you in different occasions to work with us, participate, engage with us, and also we're expecting this State of the Nation address tomorrow. But our conversation today is to look at what we expect. And we want to have an idea of what we hear tomorrow. Can we be able to reflect and see whether our government is really looking at the right things? We understand the context in which our engagements have been framed this year. There's a lot of, as we know, a lot of anxiety among the public, whether this democracy this year will be delivered to our expectation. There are big questions, and then we are all expecting to hear some of that report back tomorrow. And if it doesn't appear in that conversation, what does that mean for the rest of this year? It's a very contextual year because not only are we having elections, but it's 30 years since we gained our democracy. And a lot should have happened. And there's still a lot that hasn't happened. And that what has not happened is also generating a lot of anxiety because it seems to be that every day that passes, the chances of getting what has not been done to be done are getting slimmer. And so where do we peg our hopes? What do we do as citizens? And how are we going to make sure that we can keep our hopes alive for a better day for the generations yet to get here and those who are still growing and trying to grapple with the things that we're grappling with? So there's a lot that is going to happen, and it's going to happen because it's the right thing to do. A questioning nation is a strong nation. And I think time has come to an end where we're just passive actors in a democracy. And as we've been involved in the work of DDP for a couple of times now, you understand, we are not active, we are not passive bystanders in this democracy. We choose to engage because we know it's in the engagement that we find solutions to the problems that are really pestering us as a nation. And so my anticipation and expectation from the team and I that have worked very hard to put this together is that this room today will mean something. It will perhaps to inspire you to do something more in the spaces where you inhabit, to make sure that you're able to take these conversations there and start stimulating this kind of possibility thinking. Our nation cannot go down. Yeah, and I believe so. I still stand on the opposite side. I hope you do. Because if you've not done that, then you're done. You can do nothing in this country. So we still got to believe there is still more to be done and there is still positive things that can be done. Because so long as you and I have still got our breath, we can still do something about this nation. And so it's my expectation that through the conversation we're going to have with our guest speakers and your conversations among yourselves, that we are going to come out of this room inspired, feeling positive about this country, but more than a feeling, we are willing to take a step of action. Positive begins by you voting. But after that, it's also the engagements that you have with the people that you interact with that shape the way we think about our democracy and our role in it. So on behalf of our panelists, on behalf of our board and our winning team, I want to welcome you. Enjoy our hospitality and the engagements that we're going to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kariuki. Another round of applause for him, please. Okay, so I also have the pleasure of introducing two very highly accomplished academics in their own right, but also people that I personally have great favor for. Favor for. So with Prof, as you know, he had to leave UK. But we've joined colleagues together, and Dr. Nadvi is quite excited and anticipates the discussion is going to be happening today. Prof is now based, as Dr. Kariuki has mentioned, as the Executive Director of Canberra at the National Mandela University. It used to be NNMU before he got there. He was like, no, I don't like these long things, let me shorten it. So the name is now abridged, but no, I'm joking. Prof has a number of degrees, I think it's 7 at the last count. I don't know if he's added another one in the past 6 months, and luckily for him, ish. So I was, in the space of public discourse, analysts, etc. January was a very tough time for me because we revere some economists in this country, and of course we thought they had PhDs, but unfortunately they've fallen short of the academic vigor that is required. So when Prof and Dr. Nadvi and Dr. Kariuki, all of them decide to get their education, they expect it to be in a specific class of people. But then people take their qualifications and then they end up where they end up. So we're very excited to have real academics in the room with the appropriate qualifications. This is online, so I'm potentially damaging my own future. But thinking about this as well. But Prof is an astute political analyst and has engaged with us on a variety of subject matter, including around the subject of elections. So Dr. Nadvi, my former contemporary African politics, that's politics 206 lecturer at UKZN. Of course, I wasn't a memorable student, but I was there, I promise. Dr. Nadvi is an activist in her own right, an academic, and someone who contributes quite significantly also in the space of political analysis, and we're very excited to have both of them as part of our panel today. And just as a reminder, as you are aware, our panel exists only as people who are going to start us thinking on the right track in terms of the discussion that we have today. But primarily, whilst they might be there to sort of prompt us to start thinking, we hope that the bulk of the discussion is at the tables where you are, but also giving feedback to people, to us in the room about where and what your thoughts are in relation to the subject matter. We're going to have Prof. Ngomezulu go first, and Prof's brief is quite varied because ultimately I want them to talk through the major political moments in the past sort of 3 months that have gotten us to the point where we are, and then after that, Dr. Nadvi is going to help us to maybe do a bit of reflection on the impact of SONA 2023 and what we could potentially anticipate coming into SONA 2024. And because I know her as an activist, specifically in relation to the subject matter, I also wanted to talk about the interest that South Africa has in the international stage. To what extent is SONA actually addressed to the citizens of this country? Particularly as we look at the impact of the court case that happened at the court that is continuing also to happen at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. And so we're going to be having that input. And then, of course, we're going to be reflecting on a number of subject matters. But please, if you have a question, if you have a thought, please feel free to write it down. If you're joining us online, please feel free to comment on our YouTube page, as well as on any other social platform such as Twitter, and we'll try to feedback into the room, but also to the speakers themselves. Prof, unless you want a mic or you want a headset mic, either is fine.
I think
this one is fine. Yeah, so Prof also, is an old school lecturer, so Usakubulama overhead projectors, the ones where you see that's fine. Okay, so we're going to put up his presentation now, and then we're going to do please give him a round of applause.
Samara, thank you very much for having me. No, I think there is something. I'm not the kind of a person who gets invited twice in an event. And the reasons are very clear. I don't call a spade a garden tool. A spade is a spade. That's what it is. Some politicians like me for that, and others hate me for that, and I just don't care. Because honestly, that's not the end goal should be to build this country.
Yes.
And I always say that you cannot build a mansion on a shaky foundation. So if we try to build a nation and at the same time we're telling lies, then we'll be deceiving ourselves. So it's in that context then if maybe some of your political parties, some of your friends and your whatever, feel offended, and just tell them, I don't mean to cause harm. I'm just there to try and do things right. I thank you very much to TDP. We've had a good working relationship with TDP for quite some time. And the kinds of issues they tackle are issues of national importance. That is why I felt it was good for me to associate myself with them for this long. And from the discussions I've had with Mr. Mhlomo, whom I have given the name a henchman, DDP's henchman, because it gets you wherever you are. If you want to come to DDP events, it gets you screaming and kicking. And thank you very much for that. And Dr. Karaoke for having confidence in us. They always invite us to come and share whatever little that you know. There are a couple of things that I must just say at the beginning, just to set the project. Things that were shown. One is that tonight we are facing Nigeria. It's a fact. Yeah. We are facing Nigeria at 7 p.m. I'm not sure the result. I'm just contacting my guys to check what is going to happen. But that's one thing for sure. And then the second thing is that unlike Senegal, we are going to have elections this year. I understand in Senegal, they've just out of the blue decided to push the elections from February to December. And then I'm not sure how that is going to affect the elections calendar of that country. We are not going to do that. And the president is either he announces tomorrow or the other day, but the reality is that we are going to have an election. The third thing that we are sure of is that the president is going to deliver the State of the Nation address, as Dr. Karaoke was saying. One thing we're still trying to figure out, I was talking to Mr. Mjagane there, and he was saying that, yeah, he's not sure whether this is the last but one State of the Nation address by the president. I'm not sure, but we're just talking here. Anything is possible in the election. Okay, with that said, I'm mindful of the time, so I'll just cut to the chase. As Dr. Karaoke said, and also Mr. Mhlomo, the title of my presentation, the short presentation, State of Play, reading the political mood, referring to the Lord of MK, General Aid Statement, and of course, manifesto launches that have either happened or are about to happen. The 2024 general election will be like no other on many fronts. I've heard people say that it will be like 2024, I mean 1994. I don't hold that view. Contrary to the common narrative, which says that 2024 will be a repeat of 1994, the reality is that this election, or this year's election, will set the country on a new kind of start. In other words, we are entering a new terrain we've never entered before. In 1994, we only had a few political parties, less than 20, and we were all excited because some of us were going to vote for the very first time. We've voted several times, we've been disappointed, we've been heavy, so there are things we can refer to. In 1994, all we wanted was just to vote. Who got into position, we didn't care. Whether they had experience or not, we didn't care, as long as we voted. Things have changed now. So therefore, I'm saying this election will be different. This year marks 30 years of South Africa's democracy. So therefore, it means that you have to take stock of what we've been able to do since 1994. Good or bad, and something somewhere in between. So that is one thing that distinguishes this election from the next one. And then secondly, for the first time, independent candidates will contest the election on their own without being affiliated to any political party. This has never happened before. So this also marks a difference between this election and that of 1994. Thirdly, some opposition political parties are coming together with the hope of unseating the ANC. I was talking to someone and he was not happy with the coming together. He said, no, we must plan. They are ganging up against the ANC. I'm not sure if that is the case, but all I know is that there are political parties that have come to the realization that facing the ANC on their own is not going to produce any positive results. Hence, they've decided that they must identify parties that are like-minded and then sit around the table and then try to work together to try and face the ANC. And then fourthly, the election will take place when the ANC support is dwindling. I'm saying this from an objective point of view. If you were to ask an ANC leader and an ANC member, chances are they will tell you that the party is not dwindling. The party is growing, the party is doing this and that. But what I see, normally those who have done math, they will tell you that numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
And if you look at the 2016, 2019, 2021 election, you will see that there is a picture that is being painted. And the ANC and the official opposition, the DA, have been constantly going down like Zimbabwe's economy. Whereas on the other hand, the IOB, the EFF, and the Freedom Front Plus have been on the upward trajectory. I'm not making up those numbers. You can even ask your uncle Boke, they will confirm that. So these are facts. These are facts. So that we are having an election then at the time where the ANC is no longer the gathering of the masses the way it was in 1984. This is another stark difference. And then lastly, we also have I say here, most of President Ramaphosa's promises have not come to fruition, starting with the so-called UDO. You might have heard about it. I'm not sure. I come from Zimbabwe, which is far northern KwaZulu-Natal. Maybe Dawn comes late. I'm not sure. I've not seen it yet. If Dawn has arrived where you are, then it's fine. Dawn has descended. But from where I am, no, it hasn't. We have two reservoirs that are still dry, and there is no water, and there are no pipes to start off with. Even if you were to fill those reservoirs with water, water will not reach the communities because there are no pipes. And those are some of the facts. I'm talking about my own experience. Each of you will have his or her own experiences. Then if they have an RDP house, some even have 2, 3 houses in one homestead. Those ones will tell you, no, the drone has come and passed because they can see what has been happening. But I'm saying that we're having an election at the time when most of the promises that the 6th administration promised have not come to fruition. And then, of course, we can debate about it. And my colleague, Dr. Navi, will talk about some of this when she makes predictions about tomorrow's SONA. And therefore, the political mood in the country is unprecedented in many ways. Which is why then I'm saying that I hold a different view from those who say that this state election is a repeat of 1994. In my own observation, it's a totally different election altogether for the reasons I've just stated. Now, I've been asked to talk about Mkondo Isezu, the big elephant in the room. There is something very interesting with Mkondo Isezu. Now, I remember when I had 6 interviews on a particular day, which was less than the average 10 I normally have per day. And somebody was saying that the media has been saying that former President Jacob Zuma is going to address the nation on the 15th of December. I said, no, historically, I'm not saying that I'm going to prescribe for the former president, but historically, what would be correct would be for him to address the nation on the 16th of December, because that is when Mkondo Isezu was formally launched in 1961. So then if you're going to say anything that has to do with Mkondo Isezu, whether the old or the new one, and the reality is you must choose the 16th of December, and luckily that's exactly what happened. And people thought I had inside information, but the writing was on the wall. It's just that people were too blind to see. What is wrong or what is right about Mkondo Isezu? An historic announcement by former President Jacob Zuma on 16 December 2023 that he was going to support the MK and not the ANC shocked many people, including those who are denialists. Remember, there are people who still believe that the MK is just a no party, it's not going to do any harm. Those are denied. The reality is the MK is here and is here to cause havoc, not just the ANC, but many other political parties. Ask my friend Mutara, I will tell you. And his statement that he would remain an ANC member could only be understood by those who know the political chairs and not novice politicians and not career politicians. Let me explain myself here. And if you are a novice person, it means you are just at the entry level. You are a novice politician. And if you are a career politician, there are people who become politicians by default. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time, then you become a politician. Otherwise, you don't know what it takes to be a politician. I was talking to some members of parliament, and I think they regretted having invited me in one of the legislatures. I will not mention which one. And then in the middle of my discussion, I said, honorable members, first of all, why do we insist on this label, honorable? Why don't you just allow us to call you members of parliament? They said, but you are honorable members of parliament. They said, no, but you don't do anything honorable. So why do you deserve the label? And then I explained myself until I could reach with those who felt I was pitching at a high level. They understood what I meant.
Yeah.
Then the second question I asked was, why do you kill one another? There was a deafening silence in the room until one of them had guards and then said, yeah, it's political intolerance. I said, no, it's not political intolerance. It's because we are lazy to think.
Yeah.
If you kill me for my position and then you ascend to power, what makes you believe that Dr. Nando is not going to kill you? And then if that killing continues, it means that our country will be run by idiots.
Yeah.
Because all the smart people would have been killed. Then I explained until they understood. By the time we ended the session, we were friends. Because I was not confrontational, I was just explaining things the way they should be explained. So the point I'm making, therefore, that anyone who denies that Mkondo is causing havoc is a denialist in my view. And then, of course, can ask me after the election. Assuming, of course, that the ANC does not win in this court case at the electoral court where they say Mkondo cannot be registered as a party. I'm not sure then what they will do if someone were to come and say, but then all political movements were disbanded on the eve of CODESA, including APNA, including MK. So then it means anyone who uses MK might have picked it up on the dustbin, polished it, and then said, now it's MK party. So we still have a claim on that? I'm not sure. And I'm also not sure what they're going to say about COPE, because when COPE was formed in 2009, with a similar situation. And the ANC went to court saying that you cannot use this name because this is the name we use, which resulted into the freedom charge in 55 in Clinton in Soweto. Then the court said, but we don't have any ownership, any patent right to the name. And then COPE insisted. But that is for lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer. My mom said, you cannot be a lawyer, my son, because you will be forced to defend a criminal. And that is not what I want. Then I stopped. The emergence of the MK entered the IOP's chances claiming was I'm saying this confidently and boldly because before Mkondo was announced, I'm one of the people who said that the IOP stood a better chance to reclaim KwaZulu-Natal. To the extent that some people started associating me with the IOP, saying that I'm a member of the IOP. I said, go and check on their official list and see if you find my name. I'm just stating facts. You look at each and every by-election, the IOP has been winning almost all of them, with an exception of a few. And some people I was talking to from the ANC side said, no, don't look at that, because we know what happens with the by-elections, and there is no excitement, people don't go there. As a passed in from someone, I said, no, if you know the trick, what will you say? I'm going to get an answer. Hopefully I'll get it at the end of the stage. And while it is true that the ANC will be the main loser, other political parties too stand to lose votes to the MK. It's a fact. You may lose 10 when the ANC loses 100, but chances are some other parties will also lose to the MK. The only advantage for coalition parties is that a weakened ANC will benefit them as the DA's claim. The DA has been saying that the emergence of Mkondo is a blessing in disguise because it is going to further weaken the ANC, therefore making the job easier for the DA and its coalition partners to unseat the ANC. We'll wait and see. But the reality is, indeed, there is truth to that, even if you might agree to it only partially. Whether we like it or not, MK has reconfigured the political landscape. And we don't have to like the MK, not to advocate it, but the fact that it is there to reconfigure the political landscape. Now, because of time, let me move to the January 8th statement. One irrefutable fact is that the MK has disoriented the ANC and left some of its leaders, not all of them, some of them hysterical, to the extent that they ended up saying things they were not supposed to say in public and literally spilled the beans, thereby scoring own votes. I'm not going to have to mention somebody's name because I think you all know some of these people. Some are in this province, others are into the house. They've just been hysterical, they totally lost it. I'm not going to repeat what they said because I've said enough in the media in the past 2 weeks. But the fact of the matter is, MK found the ANC unprepared, got the ANC off guard, more especially on the eve of an election. And they ended up saying things they were not supposed to say, and they regret those things. And I was very impressed when I said something about one of the high-ranking members of leaders of the organization. Said, when this gentleman is in front of the media, he just gets so excited. And people said, no, you hate him. I said, no, I don't hate him, but I'm just stating facts. 3 days later, one of the other senior officials of the party said, yeah, you know what, this comrade of ours, whenever he sees the media, he gets overexcited and he says things when he's not supposed to say. Then I was vindicated. I said, okay, was I lying? If I was lying, how come that his own comrade is saying the same thing? You know who those people are. I don't have time for them. The 2024 general statement is not insulated from this political context. Because then, of course, as I say, it dictated, the MK has dictated both the context of the general statement, the content of what was delivered, and then, of course, the mood. That was there, and that 43,000 capacity stadium in Bombay. So, most of the time, the president found himself having to try and manage this big animal called MK, directly and indirectly. That is the reality of what happened. President Ramaphosa found himself putting off the fires ignited by the MK instead of focusing on the conventional content of the general statement. Normally, what happens during the general statement is that the sitting president, whoever it is, will do a recollection of what is as a politician, you have all the right to, and at the same main issues, and then leave the other trigger issues for when you engage the media, where we have all the time to do whatever we want to do. But on the day, while you're on the podium, focus on the main issues. In essence, the event unwittingly became a campaign tool and derailed from conventional practice followed in previous events of this nature, including, of course, the 43,000 capacity venue. So that is the Mbombela Stadium where the event was said, the general statement itself. This was evident in the theme of that particular event, which was, I quote, the year of united action to defend our freedom and advance a better life for all, forward to a decisive victory. What the president and the organization that planned that event had in mind was that this is an election year, so our general aid statement will have to speak to that. So we're going to convince people that indeed we are going to have a decisive victory. Whether that will happen or not, I'm not the judge. You are the ones who will vote. As Dr. Karim was saying, you are the ones who have registered. The last bit is on the manifestos. We focus primarily on this province. The launches of this year's manifestos will be like a chess game, where one party will watch the move of the next party and plan a checkmate. That's what parties will be doing. We are waiting and see what the other parties are putting on the floor. It's going to build 5,000 houses, I'm going to build 10,000. Then the other one said, okay, not 10,000, actually 15,000. I heard one person say that it's going to create 2 million jobs. And most of my money said it's going to create 2 million jobs. Every household will have someone working. So down with the 350. So therefore, then forget about the fact that you were given 350 in 2020 and you're still getting 350 now. Yeah. And there is inflation. Yeah. How many times has bread gone up? Yeah. Just last night, petrol price and diesel price went up, but you're still getting 50. It should be fine. I'm not saying it's wrong. Okay. Strongest was released braveness that should be commended for burying the cat. You know that English saying, I'm not an English person, but I don't know what's wrong with the cat. They said, who will bury the cat? And they were competing and then they say, okay, one will do this thing, but who will be the one to start doing it? Because everyone was scared, they were pulling because waiting for someone to bury the cat, then they will come in. So we did something very fantastic. The leader of Horizon Sons. He said, no, I'm not going to do what other parties normally do. They normally wait for the ANC to launch its manifesto, and then they can and beat whatever the ANC said, and then they increase the figures and do all of that. So he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not dependent on the ANC. I'm my own man. Then he went ahead and he launched his manifesto. Let's give him a round of applause. Let me create this group. I'm just giving create this group. If people then come and say, yeah, you see, there's now left the IP we associated him with, he's now with the right, it's fine, it's a good match. And I know of someone who was a premier, I was an ANC member and became a premier, went to O, went to DA, and then full circle came back to the DA, to the ANC. And it's a woman, and you know who the person is. If you don't know, ask me. And KZN has attracted interest from various parties, including the ANC, EFF, and IMP, all of which will launch their manifestos just next door at Moses Mapia. Then you can see the political chess game I was talking about. They want to see who's going to fill the stadium. They want to see how the mood will be like. And I saw Malema's posters all over Etegwini, even outside the CBD. In November, late November, December, I was here in December, I could see the visibility of Malema all over. And then others are trying to outshine it. But we wait and see what's going to happen. This interest is caused by the MK, is caused by the results of the 2021 general election, local government election, gains made by the IFP during that election and previous ones, the weakening of the ANC, and some development that have been happening in Gauteng metros. Basically meaning that people have this belief now that we all along, we thought that the ANC was invincible. And then all of a sudden, we've seen the ANC losing metros in Gauteng. We've seen the ANC going down in terms of support. So it means we can beat this organization. Suddenly, people who are fast asleep, they're waking up and they're seeing an opportunity that they might do something. And then that is why you see this general interest. And then secondly, people are comparing KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. They're saying the population, and you might have heard when the IEC was releasing statistical figures, Gauteng has the highest number of voters right now that have joined, have added their names on the ballot sheet. And then on the ballot, what do you call this? On the ballot, yeah. And then KwaZulu-Natal comes second. So it means that if you want to win this election, you cannot overlook KZN. So I'm not blaming the ANC, I'm not blaming the EFF, I'm not blaming the IFP. They are ready to political move where. If you want to do well in this election, you cannot ignore KwaZulu-Natal. Therefore, they are having their manifestos here. Using the same stadium that is Moses Mabhida confirms the evident competition to test one another's political might and maybe prospects. There are people who are going to use that as a yardstick to check how they are doing in the province. But as evidence has shown, filling the stadium does not translate into votes. As the EFF, they filled stadium on many occasions, but then the results were not what they wanted. And I was discussing this matter last week, saying that there are people who attend rallies because some people just like where there is noise. I mean, that's what they just like. Doesn't matter, they just go there. Secondly, there are those who go there for t-shirts. You may hate the political party, but like the t-shirt. My nephew is a Kaizer Chiefs fan like me, but then when one of the Pirates jerseys was released, I said, no. I know, I'm taking this one. He's a Kaizer Chiefs guy, but then he wanted the shirt. So there are people who go there for t-shirts. Some go there for the music, others go there for food. Some are not even eligible to vote, but they still want to go there. So don't be deceived by the numbers. I'm not saying numbers are bad. When the stadium is full, must be heavy, you've done a good job, but then that will not translate into votes. And then, of course, importantly, manifestos don't win elections. I wrote an article on this one, saying that manifestos don't win elections. There are people who vote for a party not knowing even one sentence in the party's manifesto, and they will never read it at all, but they still vote for the party anyway, for one reason. So what should politicians do? Something went wrong here. It says politician leadership. It's because initially I had political leadership. And then when I was editing it, saying politicians, the version that I gave to Giovanni did not remove leadership. So it's what should politicians do? There are a couple of things. I'm not prescribing, I'm just suggesting. One, they must stay calm and focused as they start the political move. Because the moment you are not calm, the moment you are not focused, you will do what I was saying in the beginning. You become hysterical and then you say things you are not supposed to say. So be calm and be focused. Number two, they must refrain from talking about their competitors and stick to what they are offering to the electorate. It's like you got a guy proposing a girl, and you know that I'm proposing the same girl. And if you are not smart, you are going to go to that girl and then try to backmouth me, say all those bad things, not knowing that you are canvassing for me in abstention. Before you know it, I've won and you've lost. That is what the politicians must stay away from. So just focus on your agenda, forget about what the next person is doing. You know your story, tell your story, and go, and let people be the judges. And when crafting manifestos, they must be realistic and rational. Don't promise people who are going to build 20 bridges when you're paid to build 2. I mean, it just can't happen. It's like promising someone a going to buy a helicopter. You yourself don't even want to buy it. How is it going to happen? So these manifestos, even though people don't read them, but because you read them in a public forum where there is media from all over, including international media, please don't make us jokes. Because the world is watching. Whenever there is an election, I always told my friends in government that during on the eve of an election, our intelligence must be 120% alert, because there are other people who are vested interest on the outcome of an election. So the moment we come up with the manifesto that are unrealistic, we are making all of us a joke, even people who don't belong to any political party. So please advise them if you can. And then no political party must ignore the youth in this election. And if you look at the results that have been given by the ANC, the number of youngsters who were registered to vote, those between 18 and 29, seems to have gone up exponentially, around 48% or so. And that is one stakeholder that we don't want to undermine. And the moment you come to manifesto, that speaks to us, the elderly, and you forget about the youngsters, you have already lost that election even before it happens. So never ignore them. And then, of course, they must avoid complacency, political arrogance, and political parochialism. I like the last one. You see, if somebody says you are suffering from myopia, myopia in simple English means short-sightedness. I can see up to Dr. Naim and Dr. Kariuki, but I can't see at the end. So I can only see here. So if you are a politician and you don't see the bigger picture, then you suffer from political parochialism. It can't be healthy. And if you are arrogant, you show political arrogance, no, I'm going to win this election. No matter. No, look at what the facts say. Forget about what you feel and what you think should happen. Look at what is likely to happen based on the facts. And then don't be complacent. No, I've done this thing 20 times, and it's okay. I never said in other institutions, if you follow something and you don't want to learn something new, we have normalized an abnormal situation. It's like if you've been doing something wrong for too long, it becomes normal to you. The moment somebody comes up with a different idea, you think the person is abnormal. Just like a man will tell you, okay, when in fact it's the person who is a madman. Importantly, all politicians must be tolerant of one another and consistent when dealing with their political competitors. I don't know where this excitement and euphoria about MK comes from. There are people who have just lost it. You have party A, it will say new party, it comes in today, we are fine with it, we are tolerant with the party. Then you have MK here, and then all of a sudden, the world turns upside down. I mean, by you doing that, you are canvassing for MK unknowing. Just treat MK like any political party, they have the right to exist like any other political party. Just treat them the way we treat any other party. Like I made mention of this right of that, it's a new party, and you are tolerant of it because it promises people what it wants to do, and it's not talking much about what other parties are doing or have failed to do. It's saying this is what we're going to do, and that's what we need to do. In conclusion, the 2024 general election will separate men from boys and women from girls, politically speaking. In other words, we'll see who is a girl and who is a woman. And we'll see who's a boy and who's a man. And and it will only tell through what you do and through what you say. and not just the noise that you are making. There are times when you think you are making a statement, only to find that you are making noise, and that noise does not make any sense. That is the difference. Using brains as opposed to emotions will be critical in this section. In other words, before I talk, I must first look at the statement from all angles and then articulate it. Using emotions is not going to help. But then if I use brains to think about the statement I'm going to add, that is what is going to stand. And then, of course, while contesting to win, all parties must accept the potential of a coalition government, be it a grand alliance where bigger parties come together or a minority coalition. The reality is, as things stand right now, I don't believe we're going to have an outright win. I may be wrong, but my belief is we don't stand a chance of having just one outright win. Therefore, we must think ahead. What will happen in an event that there is no outright winner? Who are we likely to partner with? Think about it now than wait until after the elections, because at the time, the last time I checked, we were given 2 weeks to make up your minds who will be forming a coalition. So that time is not enough, because we have to negotiate and then give and take and all of that. So rather think about it now. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then there's going to be a big chaos, and then of course caused by political immaturity. Because I still believe that as a continent, we're not ready for coalitions. Because we don't seem to understand how a coalition works. You come to the seat, you make so many demands. I want to be deputy president. We go one state. I want to be deputy mayor. We go one state. Those are the realities of the president. If we go outside. So, and then MK must be treated like all other new political parties. Animosity against MK might unwittingly propel it to stardom. The moment you treat it differently, then you might, in a way, be demonstrating that you've admitted that it is the main contender. And then, of course, you will not like the result that might come. Anyone who does not understand the political mood must do this. One, operation shut up. I don't know what's happening. So the least I can do is to keep quiet and learn from those who do.
Yeah.
Only after I have amassed enough information and knowledge will I not be in a position to talk. Don't talk until you know what to say. Otherwise, we'll end up doing things with you and say things that are going to regret it. Let us all get ready to vote, assuming, of course, that we have registered, and then, of course, let us take it off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think that deserves another round of applause. I think I wanted to add this 2024, 1994 situation. Yeah. I think it was well intentioned, at least by the people who adopted it first. Because and then they use it because it sounds nice. So what I understood from the 2024 is our 1994. Is the sense that as a country, collectively, we're at a precipice. Sometimes English doesn't sound right in my head. It sounds like I'm swearing. But like, we are at a juncture where we either turn left or turn right. And whatever decision we make is going to be as impactful as the one that we took in 1994. Second to that, which I feel is important to consider, and why I think this, as Prof agrees, the statement fails, is that I don't think that political parties in particular have done the work to make this moment as significant. What that requires is that we mobilize all sectors of society to actually show up to the elections. And part of the preps for today and other work for this year for us is looking at the voter turnout. I think we were at like 86% in 1994 of voter turnout. And we haven't had that since. I think in 2019 or 2021, we were sitting around 65% voter turnout, and that's incredibly low. And that's 65% of people who have registered. And we don't count the other sort of 13, 14 million who haven't registered to participate in the election. Of course, whilst we also applaud the 2 voter registration weekends, as I said earlier, the numbers aren't as exciting as they ought to be. So this, on the premise of those 3 criteria, I think that statement of 2024 is being on in 2024 fails in that regard. Of course, there's another emotive an emotional part of it as well. That at the time are slightly different. There's a lot more to be grateful for. Yes, we are dealing with a lot as a country, but somewhat in the sense that they hurt, but they touched a wound, in the sense of talking about 1924 as though it's blasé. And so a lot more needed to go into that, educating people about why that statement was important. Of course, the other political party was like, that sounds vibey, let's do it too. And because we have a platform in Parliament, that we can use it and people will think it's ours. And so that contestation. Of course, Prof also makes an important point about the tolerance versus sort of contestation. On Saturday, we have a counter-mobilizing force that's going to be happening. Amabin have supposedly come up with their own event as the king of Amazulu, and yeah, so Ungizwe Mthulu is going to be mobilizing, and they're going to have a concert at Kukudamini Park, and that's counter-mobilizing against the EFF manifesto launch that's happening in Moses Mabhida, and that's going to be an interesting thing because both of the setups have artists. I assume both of the setups have food, so we're going to see the competing interests. Whether the T-shirt wins or in the of course, I'd like to welcome now Dr. Nadvi for her portion of the presentation. We're going to have a presentation up as well, and we welcome you and your contribution. A round of applause.
Thank you. Sanbalali, good morning. Thank you so much to the DDP team and our colleagues for having invited me to speak to you on this occasion. And of course, it's always great to share a platform with Comrade Becky. Always wonderful to join you. I wanted to, can I start with my presentation if that's okay? Thank you so much. Well, let me just go back and just, yeah, there we go. So my role or my task is to look at reflections on SONA 2023 and then to look at what will probably be in 2024. I must say that I'm not a fortune teller. I don't have a magical crystal ball or any of these things. But just based on what perhaps, happened with SONA 2023, we can kind of predict, and I think Becky's done a better job of predicting what, might happen in the next or the upcoming elections. And then, of course, I was also asked to look at the role in the international sphere, the South African role in international relations and international politics. So that's what I hope to focus on a bit more. Okay, so the outline of the presentation is basically me just looking at what SONA, said. A lot was said actually. So I'm going to try and condense it and simplify it. And I normally when I give a talk, it's always nice to have audience interaction. But maybe during my presentation, I will just present, and then after that, we'll speak to some of the things that I have presented. So I'm asking the question: what was promised? What did the president say? And has it actually been delivered? And it, just looking a bit at the kind of the whole issue of have we actually got what he said we will, or that they will, deliver to us. Then SONA 2024, what to expect, and then of course the role on the international stage. So just to give you a summary of SONA 2023. The president basically said a lot of things, and if you read the SONA speech itself, he started off by sort of talking about, well, the sort of women's soccer team, Banyana won, and did well in terms of sports. He outlined other accomplishments that the country had, accomplished. So he was trying to set the tone that actually, things are not as bad as they might appear. And so that is, the sort of tone with which he started. And of course, it's always good to try president. He's supposed to lead the nation and to try and make it seem like, okay, we are, doing well. So everyone just, be calm. and all is well. So he also then, because he can't get away from this, had to deal with the reality of what had happened in the previous few years, and he spoke about the fact that we had gone through COVID from 2020 onwards. There was the huge loss of jobs, obviously related to COVID, and then trying to recover from it after that. The July 2021 riots, the load shedding issue that has obviously, bedeviled us in our politics, the destruction due to the floods, and these were some of the challenges that he mentioned were there and that we had to deal with. And this is the context in which he is now making this speech, the SONA 2023. One of the more interesting things he said is that South Africa needs solutions. So while we might actually talk about, the problems, let's focus on the solutions. And he outlined 4 basic areas of challenges that actually had to be addressed. And then, of course, load shedding. We all know that that is the bane of our existence. If you don't have electricity, you can't run a business. Productivity reduces. You can't do anything. Even if you have a generator or you have inverters or whatever, your productivity levels are still going to be much lower than if you have full access to electricity. He also presented a long list of things that they wanted to do in terms of what would happen with Eskom, how many megawatts they would need to generate, etc., etc. So I'm not going to go into all of that. What I did sort of put up is the one kind of solution that the president was saying we're going to do to address the load shedding issue. And what was that? We're going to appoint a minister of electricity in the presidency to ensure that various measures that were outlined would be implemented. So, did we get a minister of electricity in the presidency? Yes, we did, Dr. Ramaphosa, right? So that is one thing we did manage to do, but did he actually fix the problem?
No.
No. So the thing is that when he first came in, if you remember, there were so many lovely things he was saying, and he's someone who's very articulate, or rather he speaks quite a lot, and he says a lot, and sometimes you have to listen very carefully to all of the details that he presents. So the issue is, we have a minister of electricity, but we have not solved the problem of load shedding, right? We still have continuous load shedding, and we still have problems related to our energy and electricity supply. So we have to ask ourselves, has the president or has his government delivered in terms of this? And I think the answer would be no, in the way that we would want to see it having been addressed. The second issue that he spoke about broadly, which of course is a huge challenge in our country, is the issue of unemployment. We know that our unemployment figures are excessively high compared to other parts of the world. There's an official figure and then there's an unofficial figure, but the unofficial figure is excessively high, and we have young people who exit from universities who can't find jobs. We have doctors who are qualified, medical practitioners, and our country needs them very badly. Our hospitals need these medical practitioners, but they can't find jobs. We have to ask ourselves why. So there's so many sectors of our society that need people. They are qualified, but for some reason they're not able to find jobs. So the president in SONA 2023 spoke about this notion of a social compact of various role players that was promised in the previous year in 2022, but has not managed to come together in the way that they had hoped it would happen. However, there are various other initiatives that have or that we mentioned in SONA 2023 that they had hoped to put into effect, which was things like investment conferences, in other words, bringing people together from various sectors of society, talk about how they're going to invest black industrialists, various other international investors and so on. So some of those conferences did happen. However, whether it's translated into actual jobs, that we have yet to see, right? So this is something that we have to interrogate, and that's something I'm putting to you to think about. Have those initiatives that he outlined actually translated into actual jobs? Then he also spoke about reduction of bureaucracy in government. In other words, it's a lot of red tape to try and, for example, start a business, how to become an entrepreneur, and then actually, if you're not able to find a job and you want to then be an entrepreneur and become an employer yourself, become a business person, there's a lot of red tape, and he spoke about how they will try to reduce that in terms of bureaucracy in government and make it easier for people, especially young people, to try and create jobs for themselves, entrepreneurship, and so on. Also, the issue of amending legislation, as I just said, to make it easier for the entrepreneurs to start businesses, and then also to attract skilled workers, because he spoke about this issue of you need to attract skilled workers to be able to grow your economy, because if your economy is not growing, it's contracting, you have a problem. So how do you attract skilled workers? Well, we look at, for example, making it easier for international foreign workers to come with particular skill sets. Also within your local workforce to try and ensure that skilled workers do actually, find work. And of course, he mentioned things like youth initiatives that they were looking to set up. And then, of course, there's this thing that they've introduced called the Presidential Employment Stimulus, which is coming from the President's office, trying to ensure that investment takes place in terms of, a kind of national project to ensure that there's employment and job opportunities. Now, the President did mention the various, opportunities or ways in which that they have tried to create jobs. I just want to try and mention some of these things because I think that it's important to just reflect on it. So, he spoke about, for example, private-public partnerships, progress to increase worker ownership in the economy, resulting in over 400,000 workers holding shares in the firms they work for, National Skills Fund providing 800 million rand for skills training in the digital and technology sector, a cohort of 150,000 school assistants who will start work at more than 22,000 schools, and so on. So these are just some figures, and the point is that we have to interrogate this. These are the things that government is saying they have actually done since SONA 2023 was actually presented. And we have to actually ask, have those things actually had any substantial impact on our economy? And this is the question that you as the audience need to ask. The third area that the President focused on was the question of poverty and the rise of the cost of living. This is a huge challenge, not just in South Africa, but globally. We know that the cost of things are going up, food prices, petrol prices, that, go up, come down, go up, come down. It's like a sort of, sort of roller coaster almost. Just everyday living expenses and how we are to manage this. Now, the President said that, well, the one thing that they're going to do is to respond to the issue of the cost of living and poverty is the continuation of the social relief of distress grant. Now, I just want to reflect on this for a minute. Remember that, and Becky mentioned it just earlier as well, the issue of the 350. It was 350 back in 2019, 2020, it's still 350. So does it mean that if you keep on giving that 350, you're actually making a difference? And this is another question that we have to ask. Because with inflation, the cost of things go up, and that 350 is not really going to make a dent. But there's a whole debate about whether it is actually helping people, those that have no income whatsoever, they have no way of feeding themselves and their families. How are they supposed to survive? So that is one thing that continues. And of course, he mentioned increasing the amount of existing social grants. So of course, the grants for the elderly, disabled people, children's grants, and so on. So there was a slight increase in some of these grants to try and kind of offset the issue of inflation. But whether that has actually made a difference, that is something that we need to think about. I want to just reflect on something. You can give a lot of grants to people to make sure that they have access to funds so that they can buy food and so on. But what you really need is a working population. Why do you need a working population? Because you need to increase your tax bracket, or rather the sort of capacity of people who can contribute towards the business, right? If you keep on just giving people money and you don't actually have working people who can then contribute through their tax towards the fiscus to be able to do everything that we need to do in this country, you're not actually solving the problem. So on the one hand, the president and the ANC and the ruling party and so on may make it seem like we're doing great things for you guys. We're giving you all this money. We're giving you the grants. So you've got to vote for us. Think very critically about it. What they need to be doing is to be creating jobs, permanent jobs or long-term jobs that actually make a difference. So this is something I think we have to think about a bit more critically. The fourth area that the SONA spoke about, crime and corruption. And the president said, well, we're going to respond to it in the following ways. We're going to increase the recruitment of police officers, so more training of such officers. We're going to amend, or there was some amendment of the legislation related to gender-based violence, which would make it easier for victims, survivors of GBV to claim justice in the courts and so on. He reflected on that, saying that, this is something that's been done. Also mentioned that the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council has been set up, which provides some sort of support to the fight against corruption, that, there is also the investigative or investigating directorate, which will become a permanent feature of the National Prosecuting Authority. So these are some of the measures that he outlined. So I just want to, just reflect a bit on the NPA. It's good that we have a, permanent or more permanent investigating directorate, which can then go and investigate the necessary cases relating to corruption. However, if you look at the cases that have actually been investigated thus far, what has actually happened? It hasn't actually translated into the kind of convictions that we need to see. So we have to ask ourselves the question, has the actual establishment of the investigative directorate and kind of, with the resources given to it, translated into the kind of outcomes that we want to see? And the answer would then be no, yes, somewhere in between, Some of those cases have actually fallen apart because there wasn't sufficient evidence, or the case by the state was not strong enough. So this is something that we have to ask ourselves, has it actually translated into something more permanent? Okay, so there's a lot that SONA 2023 had. I can't go into all of it. I just tried to pick on a few things and just to get us talking about the issues. SONA 2024, well, obviously, I think that there would be some updates that would reflect on the initiatives that were mentioned in SONA 2023, particularly relating to the 4 areas that we just looked at, such as load shedding, unemployment, poverty, rising cost of living, crime, and corruption. The other possible announcement could be that there's more further increases to the various grants and particularly to the social relief grants. And this could be in relation to campaigning for the elections. So if you give the people a bit more money, what does it do? Makes them happy and says, okay, let me give my vote to the ANC because, you know, I'll keep getting money and what have you. So this could be a subtle campaign strategy in there to say, okay, we're going to do this so that, but of course he needs to talk to his finance minister and to make sure that there is actually money available to be able to do that. You can't just simply say, we're going to do this, but there's no money in the sort of treasury to be able to do that. So that's something that is possible. I think there will also be critical or updates on critical national issues such as the electricity regulation bill, national health insurance. Now this is the biggie. This is huge because it will fundamentally change the way that we get health care or that we access it. And it's something that we have to reflect on. As it is, we have such challenges with our national, or rather with our healthcare system. Will the NHI actually improve it? There's pros and cons relating to the NHI. The issue of the Council on Gender-Based Violence, the National Council, this is still something that's outstanding. We're not quite sure where it is. We need to still have some clarity on it. Developments, you're obviously in our various agencies and structures, SAPS, FORBS, NPA, State Security Agency, and other organs of state. So of course, we'll have to listen very carefully to what challenges, or rather what improvements may have happened and what the president still plans to do in the coming year. Because remember, the SONA is really about a plan for the coming period. Then I want to move into looking at the foreign policy issues, which obviously I will do now, but I think one of the things he's going to reflect on in the SONA is the foreign policy priorities of the government, because 2023 was a very busy year in terms of foreign policy and in terms of the presence of South Africa on the world stage. I'm mindful of time, so I'm just going to try and go through it very quickly. But the key things that obviously he, I think, will reflect on is the Palestine-Israel situation, given that the South African government has just taken Israel to the ICJ on genocide charges. The issue of BRICS Plus, what role that has or how South Africa is going to engage within that space. There's been new partners that have been added to BRICS. What role does that have? The Russia-Ukraine situation, it keeps on coming up. And of course, peacekeeping initiatives on the African continent, because there's so many ongoing, sort of issues relating to war and violence that's unfolding on the African continent. Okay, so I want to just then focus on this because I was asked to just reflect on how we appear on the international stage. And as I mentioned, 2023 was actually a very busy year in terms of the involvement of the South African government and our country on the international stage. And of course, DIRCO, which is our Department of International Relations and Cooperation, always has a very busy program. It hosts visiting delegations. Our DIRCO officials go overseas. And so every year you will always have that. So, in the previous year, there were lots of heads of states that were hosted, international delegations. And I mentioned China in particular, because the role that China plays in South Africa is very significant because it's an ongoing, kind of challenge, or shall I say, question around what role does China have in South Africa. And it's something that we need to interrogate. But it was interesting how China was given a little bit of special treatment compared to, say, India. Remember that little kind of situation where the Indian president, prime minister was sitting on a plane waiting to be received just around the BRICS conference, and he may have not got the level of respect that he had thought he would. But of course, China was given a little bit more special treatment. So just, to remember that. It's interesting little things. It's like, okay, this friend of mine, I like him a little bit more, I give him I'll literally take out good China, and if I can use that pun, and give him tea in that, and this guy, well, not so much. Why that was, well, I think it's something to interrogate. Of course, the role that South Africa had in chairing the BRICS meeting and then facilitation of BRICS Plus is important because something shifted. Remember that there's been a move towards the South becoming more present in international relations. And I mean the South, the sort of what is usually referred to as the developing world. But the sort of North and South has always been contestation. And in some ways, you're seeing the emergence of, and the importance and significance and power, more importantly, of the South countries and the role that they play economically, politically, and certainly in terms of, militarily. So it's important to focus on BRICS and how we have actually held a very successful BRICS conference by all accounts, and sort of bringing on the various additional partners like Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and so on. Argentina, of course, then pulled out because of this new leadership that came in, and they said they don't want to be part of it, which I don't know if it was sensible or not, but so be it. Of course, as I mentioned, there are several trips that have been made by the President, Minister of Durko, and the Deputy Minister. And that means that there's an effort being made by South Africa to be a role player in the international space. There's been an interesting development, and I'm mentioning this, people have talked about it a lot, a strengthening of ties between South Africa and Iran. I don't know if you've picked this up, but the International Relations Minister has, had interaction with the Iranian government and her counterpart there. So people have said this is significant. And then this kind of links to the Middle East as well, because there's this whole debate going on about, is Iran, for example, funding a whole lot of things, like, for example, how is Hamas able to resist or fight back against Israel militarily? Where is that money for funding coming from? Is Iran supplying those, kind of that support? So this relationship, I think, is important, and that's why I'm stressing it. South Africa's ongoing relationship with Russia, of course, is critical, because South Africa considers Russia as an ally, and of course that relationship is always constantly being, highlighted. I haven't mentioned South Africa's relationship with America as much, because I think that's slightly on the decline, because I think there's challenges there, and that has to be reflected on. But yeah, these other sort of growing relations between these other countries. The South African rugby team, the Springboks, I think it's significant because it put us on the map, right? In a way that, sports has a role to play in international politics, whether we like it or not. It said something about our sports capacity is really outstanding, and that we have what it takes to win. And so that's why I mentioned it as something that we can look at as part of our role or our place in the international community. Something interesting as well, Prof. Tirek Tladi has just been recently appointed as first South African judge to the ICJ bench. Why is that significant? Because he is the first South African judge on the bench. And because that ICJ space has always been controlled more by kind of Western, North set of countries. So more Southern African presence on the bench is actually good. And it's an achievement for us as a country. And of course, we know that Israel has taken South Africa has taken Israel to the International Court of Justice on genocide charges. We all watched the brilliant presentation by our lawyers to the ICJ. We then heard, of course, the ICJ's response, and the response was that yes, Israel is in all likelihood committing genocide. It's plausible that they're doing so, and they've made an order. But unfortunately, the bombing has still continued. There's been no ceasefire as such, so that situation still remains. But I'm not going to go into detail on that. That's just one, huge matter. So I have tried to reflect on all of the areas that have been asked to, from the SONA 23-24 to looking at the international stage. And thank you for your attention. I hope that I've been able to provide you some food for thought this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. May I have a applause, please? Yeah, see. So I was looking at the appointment, and that's quite, I think yesterday was the announcement of the appointment of Prof. Kadi. And I was thinking about our other colleague from Sub-Saharan Africa who didn't vote with us in that court case. And not even once did she vote with the majority. And so it's interesting in terms of that. Does representation guarantee, for instance, that the outcome will be different for Southern, the global South, as it were, on some of those platforms? And then, of course, what was the last point?
Sorry.
It's okay. So in course, now we can get on this. The last point that is taking Israel's. Oh yes. So even though the outcome didn't guarantee a ceasefire, but also it sort of voted in our side. What's been interesting is how the global north has reacted to that decision by withholding aid to the UN, it's CHR, one of the UN agencies that are responsible for giving support to the aid mission. And so even if justice is on our side, the money doesn't always rest on our side, and therefore, in one way or the other, the global south continues to be disadvantaged. And so that's a sad reflection of where we are in the state of global politics. Before I give you an opportunity to give direct Q&A, I'd like to offer you some tea, but that tea is a working tea, which means please go and grab, and then we'll continue the program. Grab something to eat, grab a refreshment break, and then come back in about 5-10 minutes. We'll start promptly again at 20 to 12 with our program. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All right, but the job before it.
the students ask questions. So in this case, we like it when our audiences also ask questions because it means they were listening attentively. No, thank you very much for that. Maybe starting with Mr. Mtawai. As I said earlier, figures don't lie. I didn't manufacture these figures. I don't have to like him, nor do I have to dislike him. I just have to deal with the facts. And the figures he's presenting are correct. To say that we've moved from point A to point B, and there are certain circumstances that have led us to that. And the question is, what are we doing about that? Because as you correctly pointed out, in tomorrow's SONA, my own suspicion is same as his, that we hear more of what we've heard before, except that this time around, it will be robust because it's an election year. So the scales will be tilted in favor of the positives, the things that you've been able to do. You'll hear more of the job, how many job summits we've called, how many investment summits we've called, but then of course you and I will ask, what did those amount to? Because you and I are down there were the recipients, were the end users of all those mechanisms. So definitely he's absolutely right. And maybe to add as well, I was looking at our corruption index as a country, global corruption index. Our president assumed office and he said he made two profound statements. One was the so-called 9 wasted years. And I was asking those in the ANC, guys, why did you allow the president to mislead the country and the world? Because he said this at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Why didn't you ask the president, where were you during those 9 years? Were you not Zuma's deputy president in the ANC? Were you not Zuma's deputy president in the country? By virtue of being a deputy president, were you not the leader of government business? If there was accused number 1 and accused number 2, would you not be accused number 1 and then the president be accused number 2? So the 9 wasted years was a lie. And then number 2, it was the so-called New Dawn. And I just shared with my sister there that I wrote an article, a journal article, where I was debunking the New Dawn myth as pronounced by both President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Emerson Mnangagwa. As a result, people said then I must not consider going to Zimbabwe because I'll be intercepted at the airport. I was saying that you cannot talk about a new dawn if you come from the same organization. Because what happens, you have a policy conference first, then you have an elective conference. At the policy conference, you agree on the policies that you are going to implement should you win an election. Then at the end of the day, whether Dr. Navi wins or I win, it's neither here nor there. We are going to implement the same policies. So the point that then Mr. Mtawai is making just reminded me of that indeed these figures don't lie. My sister, you have made a very critical point because you have reminded me of the variables we use when we assess different constituencies, including the electorate. One of them, of course, is age. It becomes a variable, young and old, and somewhere in between, missing maybe. And then we have gender, and we have race, and then, of course, we have the urban rural divide, and then we have ethnicity. And then I would add, you also have religious differences. What has killed this continent in general is the issue of religious intolerance and then also ethnic differences. This is what has killed most of the African countries. I know, for example, in East Africa, we have as many as 200 ethnic groups. In Nigeria alone, we have as many as 250 ethnic groups. So that is the problem. Luckily, in South Africa, we call ourselves a secular state. So these religious differences are not that much. In terms of ethnicity, once in a while, we hear people say that Inkatha is for Amazulu, ANC is for Amaxhosa, which is just lies. I had to write a piece on that, demonstrating that the leadership of the ANC from the beginning was not Xhosa, it was Amazulu, and they didn't see themselves as the owners of the ANC, which is why things like Isaac said, you must watch against tribalism. So those are some of the factors. But then the point my sister is making is a very critical one. When we focus on the youth, then we tend to focus less on the elderly. In my case, I deliberately mentioned the youth and not the elderly because of the context I was talking to. For quite some time, the youth has been ignored as people who are not that much effective in terms of election outcomes because one, some of them don't register, and then even those who register, they don't vote. They just don't care. If you tell them that the ANC delivered you from a party, say, what's that? I went to school and my friends were Kannada, Indian, and whatever, so I don't know what you're talking about. So the context, therefore, is not the same.
Okay, there we go, we're back on. But you do it, running.
Yeah, all right, where was I? Joman, where was I?
So, you were in the youth, don't say the context of
The youth and the elder, yeah. So these youngsters, that's why you saw the majority of the youth going to the DA and going to the EFF and less going to the ANC. I'm just making those three examples. Because they don't necessarily believe that the ANC liberated us because they don't know that. Some of them were born when we were already free, and that's why they are called born frees. So they don't have that history. With the elderly, the majority of the elderly people, especially here in KwaZulu-Natal, have either been voting for the IFP or voting for the ANC. For their own, they don't care about the manifesto. Some of them can't even read it, but they will just vote for those two parties. These youngsters are critical. If you say you are going to do A, B, C, D for them, they say, no, but you're complaining about less fast. What are you doing about that? They are talking about these bread and butter issues for them, which might not necessarily be the same thing you would market if you were to go to the elder. So it's in that context, but I take your point that indeed we cannot focus on the youth and then forget about the elder. We have to focus on all of them, but in different contexts and then use different strategies. The point is well taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I agree with what Becky has said about, if I can start on the second question first, because for me, it's very important that in any manifesto, all of the various constituencies in the country are actually addressed, whether it's the youth, the elderly, women, people with disabilities, etc. And all of these constituencies matter because if a party is serious about getting votes, they have to make sure that they speak to all of them. In terms of the rights or the sort of opportunities for the elderly, I think that our country, needs to actually use the skill set that the elderly have more effectively, because what, as Becky was saying, that the youth itself, has been kind of ignored to some degree, but currently, what is happening is that young people are critical about what is, happening, and they're asking questions, and the way in which they get sort of drawn to specific parties. Like, for example, Rise and Zanzi is an interesting example of a new party that is speaking particularly to the youth, because that is the vote that it wants to attract. When EFF came into existence, it was going for the youth vote. So not many parties are actually looking for the elderly vote or the older vote, but the elderly have so much of wisdom, they have so much skill, and so many things that they can offer. And I think that if our government had some creativity, it could actually use that existing capacity and say to the elderly, get together with young people, mentor them. We have a huge gap in mentorship in this country. We see young people really perhaps not having the kind of leadership and direction and guidance that they need. And so I think the elderly can be sort of approached, the older generation can be approached to help the younger people in various ways. But in terms of manifestos, obviously their rights need to be considered. And I hear what you're saying. Just giving them the grant is not enough. I think a manifesto must actually speak to, we believe that the elderly can actually play these particular roles in terms of the political space, guidance, mentoring, sort of also maybe be employed to do certain things which can help the younger population. I think what's happening is this election is actually catering to more of a youth vote, because the young people are concerned about the fact that they don't have jobs. Many of the elderly, if they're in their 60s or older, they have, had a full, if they have been working, have had a full sort of working life, and perhaps they're looking now to their retirement and how to live, their kind of older years and so on, and retiring. But the political parties are speaking now to the youngsters, and that's the vote that they want to attract. So I do think there has to be a balance, but your point is well taken that political parties cannot ignore the elderly. In terms of the first question about all of the challenges of unemployment and prices, the cost of living going up, absolutely, that is the challenge that we face. That how do we survive in this country when things are so expensive just to live from day to day? That is, that has become a huge challenge. And if you are not employed, if you rely on a grant to survive, and of course there are things that people do to get these grants that really boggles the mind, in terms of, if you look at how, for example, some of this social grants system unfortunately also gets exploited to be able to enable people to access those grants. So one of the challenges we do have is how to ensure that we get our economy working again, that we actually have a larger population or more people who are employed, so that we can grow our economy, our sort of inflation can, sort of be managed and controlled, and how do we actually fix the economy? And that is actually our real challenge at the moment. In terms of petrol prices going up, I think sometimes there are international forces that may not be, it may not be possible to always manage them and to control them. But again, I think if you have a well-managed economy and a sort of a fiscus kind of system that is well maintained, then you can actually keep prices or costs of things under control. But again, with petrol, it's kind of a resource that comes from overseas, so you can't always control these things. And I think in terms of the issue of crime is a serious problem with regard to, our safety is really what matters. If you don't feel safe to leave your home, what kind of society are we living in? If our women and our sisters, our mothers are being killed just because they're women, the GBV rates in this country are just shocking. It's just unbelievable. So crime has gone to the extent that it has become completely, unmanageable. And even though you can put more police on the streets, you can, resource the NPA and so on, I think what we need is more of a kind of a policy that is not just reactive to crime, but it is proactive. In other words, you put measures into place to make sure the crime doesn't happen in the first place. Because one of the challenges we have is that we are responding more to criminal activity. And what is it that is causing crime? People, who commit crime obviously are motivated by certain factors, whatever they may be. Why does someone kill, another person for, say, just a few rand? What causes someone to do that? Or just for a cell phone? Is life so cheap in this country? These are the questions we have to ask. So it's a bigger social problem. It's a kind of psychological issue as well. And I think we have to work towards creating a society where we prevent crime. We find ways to prevent the crime instead of trying to react to it where we are, trying to constantly hold people accountable after the fact. Because our jails are full of criminals. Our judicial system is battling to run cases. Our, what do they call it, DNA and other sort of systems are battling to be able to hold or to do the tests that can, provide evidence in cases of rape and so on. So we have a serious problem in terms of managing crime, and we have to ensure that we are going to prevent the crime. And that's what I would say. If I want to hear a manifesto that speaks to that, I want to really hear people saying, parties saying, this is how we're going to stop the crime, not how we're going to just respond to it. So those are just my thoughts on the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yeah, it's interesting. I think in 2014, and these very sort of resounding and impactful speeches by these presidents always get made on election year. And in 2014, it was Jacob Zuma's "We have a good story to tell" mantra. And unfortunately for the ANC, the good story to tell, they always go back to 1994 as opposed to the past 5 years of my presidency, for instance. Which is why I think it's important for us to consider what comparisons we make when we ask for an assessment of a presidency. We do so in that 5 years. It's not about what happened in 1994 till today, but it's about what happened in the past 5 years. I think we get a clearer picture of the impact of that presidency. In 2019, I don't know if the speech was made in 2018 or 2019, but the one around Tumamina. Oh yeah, it happened in 2018 because now you were meant to send him, and then right? Yeah, sending him still. It started in 2018 because yeah, it started in 2018. So yeah, and then you guys sent him now. Yeah, imagine, how as children, when we were sent to the tuck shop, our parents would spit in the glass and say, you must come back before the stick disappears. But now, I don't know, the grass is grown, still nothing is happening, and the child is not back with the thing that you asked them. Or they come back to you and they didn't buy what you asked them to buy. They bought you a bunch of loans internationally, they bought you, so all of that is a consideration, of course. Paul, you have a, yes, sorry, not Karim here. You have a question or comment?
Good morning, Prof.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Prof. And good afternoon, Doc. I've got 2 questions. The first one you might need to summon your psychic powers to look at the crystal ball and look into the future. The possibility of a coalition. How you think it will pan out? I know Sholos was very clear. He wants to rescue ANC. He's working for another party and campaigning for another party, but it's still ANC. Forget that he has been expelled or suspended, forget all that. And all the charades and even shouting at each other. They say in politics there are no permanent enemies and permanent friends, but permanent interests. Could there be any possibility that they could coalesce in terms of the national government in case ANC doesn't cross the line? And then the second question goes to the multi-party charter. I know it was moonshot back in the beginning. What are the dangers of having a pre-election coalition pact? Are there any dangers that the masses might punish you? Like we know the rhetorics like DA is a white party. If I were to do a pre-election pact agreement with them, will I be punished together with them? Or is it better to do that after the outcome of the election? Thank you.
Interesting. So when is the right time to start talking about coalitions? Before the election, after the election? We are aware, for instance, of instances like Germany, Unfortunately, the period of change of government in this party, in this country rather, is too close to the election. I think it has to be resolved within, 2 weeks, everything finalized, and then the new parliament takes its seat. And so that becomes a complexity. In Germany, it could take up to 6 months for a new government to take, even though you won the election 6 months ago. The administration and the changes take as long as 6 months at times. And so, and that's sort of the more developed coalition type governments we have in the world. Any other question or comment? Yes, sir.
I would like to greet Professor Ngomengulu and Dr. Nat. My question is, pre-1994, we're chasing the common enemy, which was apartheid and segregation. After that, why we, instead of seeing South Africans or Africans coming together, but we see new political parties emerging? And two, why dealing with corruption decisively is taking more taxpayers' money than solving any problems to Africans? Talking about constituencies, youth, elder people, you name them. Because we see many youth, young people in the streets. I remember during the time of apartheid, there was reformatory schools like that. Why we see young people every day in the street, but not even 1,000 young people in the reformatories, in order to solve the problem of young people, even taking them away from taking substances. Coming to the point of the MK is the elephant on the block that we cannot deny. Even we are denying things. Why DA, if it's seeking a friendly user solution, do not ignore the leading party and come to the common platform with the MK in order to achieve or unseat the common enemy that has been there for years, and bury the ethnic groups and focus on the solutions of all South Africans.
Okay, that's that was a lot of questions. But you know, everyone keeps on saying the elephant in the room, and then they forget that the IMP is actually here. I would prompt Dr. Nadri to get us going. Yeah, fun now.
Yeah, it was to expose me to Johan. Maybe let me try to start from a relaxed position. Johan, when you talked about Tumame, yeah, I heard you about the good story to tell, and I don't know if it's still good now. There's a story for another day. On the issue of Tumamina, I remember at one point saying that the president was right in saying that, in citing, in fact, a human scale, Tumamina, send me. Because on many occasions, he will tell you, he will remind you that he is a Christian. So he was right. But he also forgot another song by Hugh Scale, Kaules. Meaning that you must be quick. So had the president used both Tumamina and Kauleza, I think the new dawn phenomenon would have worked somewhat because it would have reached us at this point. All right, yeah, on a serious note, let me try to address these questions in reverse order, and I will address them shallowly, deliberately so, and leave the thrust of the discussion to my colleague here. Okay, on the issue of the MK, why can't the DA forge relations with the MK? There are quite a number of factors. Some of them have to do with political pride. But then the other one, of course, has to do with the fact that the DA doesn't see MK as an enemy. Still is on record saying that he is in fact happy that there is MK, because MK is going to further reduce the ANC. By the time his coalition comes, the ANC would have been weakened, and then his job will be easier. So it doesn't see MK as an enemy. But the point, the question that is raised by Ulda is a very important one. If you see that that MK is going to cause havoc, then why not join hands with them at this point and then make your job even easier? That's a critical question. I totally agree with you on that one. That if I were to advise the DA, I would say to them, let's look at some of your coalition partners and see who is bringing what, and then see if you could replace one with MK or bring MK to the fray, and then see what could come up. So that point is a valid one. And then on the issue of reformatory schools, you reminded me of a statement once made by Oliver Tambo. Oliver Tambo at one point said, look, comrades, currently we are a liberation movement. We're not a political party. But then some of the problems we are identifying with the government party, the apartheid government, you will find that when we are on that side of the table, we might do even worse than they've done. That's one statement he made. Whether then he was predicting something, I'm not sure. But he said some of the things that the apartheid government is doing right now are things that we are most likely to do when we are sent to office. And that has come to fruition. Another statement he made was that at times, comrades, I remember during the Morogoro conference of 1969, the situation was not nice at all at that time. And then he said, you know, the likes of Chris are asking very critical questions. And you guys are saying we must fire them. I don't hold that view. Because how many people are going to fire? Each time you disagree with us, then we fire you. Who will be left? Because all of us are bound to make mistakes. All of us are bound to be dissatisfied at some point. Then Oliver Tambo said, there will be times when you have to speak the truth, even if the truth confirms what the enemy is saying. And he was right. You don't necessarily have to look at who's saying what. You have to look at the issue and then deal with the issue as it stands. So the question that we're asking about these reformatory schools, one mistake we made when we ascended to power as the black folk was to undo everything that apartheid did, even things that were working. I understand the issue of capital punishment, which people call death penalty. There are certain instances where I've been accused of wanting to see people die. When I say that there are cases, in my view, which deserve a death penalty. I go to church when I have a chance to do so. So I do go to church when I have a chance to do so. But honestly speaking, tell me, how does a 20-year-old guy rape a 90-year-old woman? Or I mean, is the brain still working? How does someone stab a pregnant woman 28 times and then still try to raise it? Look at this guy who has killed 6 sex workers, and now they are saying that there must be extenuating circumstances that might have led him to doing this. And then some would say, no, let's check if his brain was. No, this person just deserves to die, in my view. But then, of course, I'm not a politician, so I can say these things. As politicians, you have to be careful. So the point I'm making, my brother, is some of the institutions that existed under apartheid would have helped us now with some modifications, of course, including this reformatory schools. They would have helped us because, as my colleague was saying, our prisons are full. And we decided, by the way, we no longer call them prisons, we call them correctional services. And I met one guy who was saying that life was better there in the prison than here outside. Here I have to find money to buy bread, to buy this, and there was currently 3 meals a day. It was right. Next door in Westville prison, prisoners wanted DSTVs, and they went on a hunger strike. How many of us have DSTVs? We can't afford them, but then they wanted them. Okay, so some of the things that we changed were not supposed to be changed. We're supposed to modify them, and then we made those mistakes. Reformatory schools are some of them. Now, you are then saying that we had a common enemy, which is correct. We had a common enemy, and then after 1994, we have so many political parties. This brings me to the point I made earlier on about career politicians. Jobs are scarce, let's agree. Jobs are scarce. And there are people who have posed as politicians when they are not, just because they want to earn a living. So today I can be a politician, not because I'm the right person to be a politician, but because I don't have a job. So then this is the job that I have. That is why even brown envelopes are going far down to the branch level. When you have a branch meeting, there will be brown envelopes. They don't just go in parliament or when you go to these high offices. So this thing has been going on. So the reason why we have so many political parties is not because I cannot find a political party to join. It's because I know that if I have my own political party and we get one seat, I will be the one occupying the seat, then I have a job. So in other words, we are satisfying our political goals, but we're also satisfying, we're responding to our socio-economic needs. That is why we cannot be united. We're united then because of the common enemy. Now we don't have a common enemy. You are living in Utlanga and I'm living in the township. Definitely we're not the same. You may be selling Kala, but we're not the same. You are earning 5,000, I'm not earning anything. A reliable parent doesn't help me. We're not the same. So these differences, therefore, put us apart and we're not going to come together. If anything, we'll be divided even further. After this election, the number of political parties will go up because if I can see that so and so is formed the party and is doing well, I want to do the same thing in the next election. Not because I have what it takes, but because I want to earn a living. So that should be my response. On the other question by Sony, it says we look at the possibility of a coalition. That was the reality. My sister said she doesn't want to predict, but I think from what I can see, looking at the trends, I don't see an outright win. I see a party that will have more votes or more seats, but I don't see an outright win. So then this issue of coalition is a reality. So it's better to start thinking about them now. Coalitions that have lasted for longer, including the ones that Joman was referring to, countries like Germany, countries like Denmark, India, Australia, and so on. They plan these coalitions. It's not something that is imposed on them by the results after the election. They plan these coalitions, and these are pre-election coalitions. So then they decide, okay, these are the things on which we agree, these are the things on which we disagree, but then at least for the sake of us forming a government, let us be prepared to let go of this and keep this for the sake of the country. Unfortunately, in South Africa, I don't think we've reached the stage. It's either me or nobody else. So in this case, then, ideally, a pre-election coalition is more feasible and more durable than a post-election. Because the pre-election one will still have options. I don't want to forge relations with my sister here, but I can forge relations with my brother there. I have the choice before an election. After elections, like Yoman was saying, you are given 2 weeks to form a government. So if there is no outright winner within the 2 weeks, I must make sure that I have someone to work with. I may grab whoever comes first, only to find that 2 weeks down the line, I made a mistake. Then no, that coalition falls away, then I grab another. We have seen this in municipalities, many municipalities. That is what has happened. Because these post-election coalitions are imposed on us by the results of the election, and therefore they are not durable. And next year we're going to find ourselves in the same situation because people are just politically greedy. And then the last one, that's a multi-party charter. And I think I have spoken to that. If there is anything, I have my sister here will attend to it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So let me start on the issue of coalitions. Coalitions are an inevitable reality of our political landscape. And while I say I don't want to predict certain things, I can say with some certainty that in all likelihood we will have a coalition type of setup, because I also don't think that the ANC will necessarily win an outright majority. If you look at the trends internationally, you do see that coalition governments have been, the sort of the more common way in which governments have been run. And this is because voters are not necessarily wanting to vote for one party only. And it's because maybe those ruling parties have lost the support of their usual sort of voters. So I think coalitions are something that we actually will see more of. And it's very important that you actually, as Becky said, have to plan for them, because you don't want to be caught unawares or unprepared because you don't have anyone to work with. So I think this moonshot or moon pact, whatever it is called, was sensible in terms of bringing people, parties together that can work together. What I think is a concern for me is the kind of things or policies that the parties who have come together in this moonshot pact stand for. And I want to reflect on something, because I've kind of been, observing this. Most of the parties that are part of the moonshot pact, which is led by the DA, support Israel. And what I've noticed is that if I'm asked and I'm part of conversations about who you're going to vote for, many people say, well, I can't vote for the DA, I can't vote for the IFP, I can't vote for many of the parties that are in that moonshot pact because of their support for Israel. And in the more recent situation where South Africa has actually taken Israel to the ICJ, the question is, which of those parties in that pact are going to actually get support of voters voting for them? And so this is something that we have to think about. But in terms of coalitions, it was a sensible approach to make sure that, okay, these are the partners that we will have when the results come in. In terms of multi-party situation, we are increasing, we are a multi-party democracy. So there's several reasons for why more parties have emerged. One is that you can create a new party, and there's so many now that one has lost count. And of course, it's also a guaranteed form of income, as Becky said, that it's a way of actually ensuring that you're going to have an income. More and more people are resorting to enter politics or to become a councillor or whatever the case may be, because they are assured of some kind of income. And I want to reflect on something else. We've seen this trend of, for example, political assassinations, which is a very common phenomenon in KZN. And why is that happening? It's because the people who are engaging in this political assassinations are trying to take out others who are actually in what they consider in their way. So if someone is already in a position where they earn an income, or they're a councillor, or have some kind of political position, they become a threat to somebody else who wants to aspire to that. And so therefore, we're seeing more of this trend of political assassinations. You kill this one, you have a chance of getting into that position, and so on and so on. Of course, there's also enmities and those kinds of things that are there, but really it's linked to this issue. In terms of the whole idea of the 1994 and the kind of post-1994 situation, I think that, clearly we're seeing lots of things that have changed. We're in a kind of new reality, and that reality is, of course, based on our socioeconomic situation. This thing that people had, the ANC had promised us a better life for all. Unfortunately, that has not materialized. So where we are right now is that there's greater contestation between the various groupings, the political groupings, the social groupings, and this political contestation is manifesting itself in different ways. So the kind of scenario with the MK is interesting because if Shalozi is saying, well, I'm still ANC, but you know, I'm going to support another party, most of us would say, well, that's cognitive dissonance. Something is not connecting here, right? He's saying all these things, but he's obviously trying to create chaos. And maybe he's, who knows what his real motives are. So I think that you have to obviously observe these things quite closely to see how it's going to unfold. But he obviously, or MK, serves the interests of parties like the DA and that pact, because it takes away votes from the ANC. And what is the goal of this Moonshot Pact? It's to ensure that the ANC loses votes. It's not necessarily to, you know, create a more kind of stable or, well, I mean, they claim that that's what they want to do, but it's really to take away votes from the ANC so that you have a new political reality that comes into power. The issue of young people and reformatories and so on, yeah, I mean, I think that we see a new situation where this thing of how young people are basically being dealt with, especially when it comes to criminal, you know, activities and so on. We need to ensure that we have ways to try and rehabilitate young people who may get caught up in these kinds of things. But how do we actually do that? As I said in my previous responses, it would be good if we try and prevent the crime from happening in the first place, as opposed to trying to fix the problem after that. But at the end of the day, we do have a high crime rate, and we do have to make sure that, you know, we try and create a society where crime is not the goal for young people. What should be the goal for young people is to succeed and to look towards having more of a kind of, you know, a successful social outlook, as opposed to saying, well, in order for me to survive, I have to do crime, and you know, there's no other way for me to survive. So I think these are some of the challenges that we are going to be faced with. In terms of, I think I've pretty much responded to most things, but coalitions are definitely the way to go, because that is the reality. I don't know how many parties do we have on the ballot sheet. Do we know yet?
Not yet, not yet. Not on the ballot, no.
Yeah.
We have about over 300 registered.
Yes.
But we're not sure whether 350, yeah, over 350. But we're not sure how many are going to be on the ballot yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. We have 350 political parties registered. Oh, I just want to also mention this idea of political careers. Do you guys remember when Musi Maimane started WASA? Or started the one in South Africa? He was talking about independent candidates and helping them. So how many of those independent candidates have you seen on WASA posters? Or are you only seeing Musi Maimane? And what does that mean about this political careerism that we're talking about? I think it happens when it comes to councils and municipalities and councillors, but think about it on a national stage as well. What is the difference between WASA and National Say, for instance, in terms of their positionality? And why didn't they come to terms? Someone was talking, an analyst as well, about the nature of Musi's leadership. Think about the fact that he was essentially out of the Democratic Alliance, but how many of the Democratic Alliance other leaders who have since left the DA actually followed him? Today, why don't they believe in his style of leadership? And so, yeah, as you assess all of these different parties, that's something to consider. when it comes to the multi-party charter, there are some hangers-on, clearly, some that we don't even know. I don't know some of the UIM and what was the other one, but they're just there. We know potentially they might even contest the national election, but it's interesting that they sit there, they have a seat there. I think I was telling someone yesterday, it must be nice to just go to conferences and meetings for the sake of it, without knowing actually that you're going to do something. So if we're looking at real viable options on the cards, in that one, there are 3 or 4 of them out of the 6 or 7 people that sit on that stage. So what impacts does partnering with organizations like UIM and others have on your legitimacy going forward? Are there any final thoughts, questions, and comments? It's a final round of hands, so I'm going to take 1, 2, any more? 3, any more? I'm doing this so that you don't, sometimes we hear something that spirit moves us. If by the time the spirit moves you, it will be too late for you to raise your hand. So we've got 1, 2, 3. There's a final round of hands. Is that fine? Cool. Let's start with you, ma'am. Oh, this mic also works. Sorry. Everyone seems to be coming back here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this very thought-provoking and insightful dialogue that I'm able to be here today. One of my greatest challenges, and I know it might sound domesticated, but I think that it needs critical resolve and intervention. I'm involved in the gate of education with the young people in schools for the past 2 decades. And I know many years ago they took away the guidance counselors from our schools. And in my work with the young people at school, I just find it critically in a desperate state of where the young people are at school. We have bullying, we have teenage pregnancies that are on the rise. And just this week on the headlines, a young teenage girl committed suicide, and this time it was not a pupil that bullied her, it was a teacher that bullied her, and an innocent life was gone. So I want to know in terms of the gate of education, because we say that the youth are going to be a game changer in the political move in South Africa for this upcoming elections. However, if we understand succession and the next generation of young people that are going to impact South Africa, we can't have kids as 12 years old, pregnant, young girls, and bullying and all the serious issues that we have in our education system. We really need intervention in the gate of education, and we really need to help these young people so that they can become future leaders, because they are the succession generation. And what kind of leaders are we going to raise up if we have 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds pregnant and young people committing suicide? That's my first challenge. My second challenge is that the religious systems and, the religious sectors, I'll use the church as an example because I'm part of the church. They say 70% of our constituency is Christian. So the church is so silent concerning change and transformation, national transformation in our country. And what are we doing in our churches so that the church won't be silent concerning politics and the change, concerning the landscape of change and transformation in our country? I know all religious sectors should get involved, but I know that the church is really lagging behind in terms of transformation. So God, please help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Generally, I think the role of churches and other civil society organizations seems to be on decline in some respects. Outside of organizations that have a very specific sort of mandate, we don't seem to coalesce as much as civil society. We have broad coalitions that have died off, have been silent, have been supposedly politically infiltrated. And so, when people talk about the vote being a group exercise, we seem to have a sense of, there's a general consensus on what the problems are, but there's no real consensus on what the solutions ought to look like. And so that becomes a challenge. And that's the reason why there's so many political parties that are mushrooming, even though if you really look at them, none of them are offering very innovative solutions or different ones from what the current sort of political elites are offering at the moment. So second hand here, yes.
All concept of observance, compassions,
Yeah.
philosophy.
Family meeting, we have family meetings.
Just a little. But my concern is coming from, attaching from what Prof said, 30 years into democracy. My worry is that all of these political parties serious about developing young people in terms of when they are manifesting and putting their manifestos into actions. I've never seen one political party really serious about developing young person in terms of we are sitting at 58% of unemployment rates, but there's not even a single implementation plan that is going to live to say that we are uplifting young people and we are giving them permanent and resolute jobs in terms of them developing themselves. We are currently sitting at a crisis whereby South Africa Police Service recently took out a post for young people, but they've been called, but you can see young people, they are just doing it for the simple fun. There's not even young person who has been called for a permanent employment. What kind of country are we living in whereby young person? Secondly, the issue of crime, as has been stipulated there by my speaker. Again, I'm worried what's going to be said in SONA and what political party is going to be saying about crime after SONA, because there are townships whereby it's been 5 years, it's been on top of the crime statistics whereby you think that crime is so high, rape is so high in this area. I will not mention it. No. It's so high, number one. Every time it's number one. But there's not even one single political party or one political person who has seen that I'm putting our leading political party saying that I'm putting a budget to say go and deal with crime in that particular area, but you can find that whenever women are crying and saying GPV, there is so much money that is being put to women, but what about our safety in this country? Are we really saying, are all of these political parties that we are saying that we are joining, we are after, they are manifesto are good, they are speaking well, but again, I would say, I would really say in this country, my concern is that we are not safe in this country. Our government is letting down our security cluster, our police officers. So some of them, they crisis in themselves, but what we know is that when you call when there's no value, we are blaming themselves. But the real question is that you must do a background check and saying that there are people to be blamed. Our government is to be blamed for letting down some of the people who are not safe in this country, not employed in this country, but they're always manifesting saying that they're employed in this group. Young people, but the employment rate is going up 58. Next year it will be 67. What kind of country is this? Maybe we need to look at it in terms of when we are looking at these all political parties, we need to look at ourselves. If maybe we are making the right decision to follow the right people. If not, I don't think we should be encouraging all of these political parties to continue doing the job that they are doing, because they are actually lacking and providing for the people they are saying that they are. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important to be introspective and think about the status of the platform WhatsApp. T-shirts you wear on those status. Yeah, very important. We are Guys.
Yeah, interesting conversation. So I think for SONA, we know what to expect. EFF will speak, probably when in Parliament. Then after 30 minutes, 45 minutes, everything settles. I think for me, what concerns me is our president. For me, it feels like the president lives in another country, and so he tells a lot of lies. What seem to be a lot of lies. But I think for me, what worries me is that he believes the things that he says. That's the law. And then to talk and talk. So after we have discussed collisions and everything that we have spoken about, what kind of conversation should we be having as a nation? Because sometimes it feels like, we move with the wind. Congo comes out for 6 months, the nation is discussing Congo. On TV, there's a case for Senzo Mayor, all countries discussing that. So it's like there's no agenda for the nation. So my question to Doc and Prof is, if you were to craft a national agenda, if you are given that task this for a week, what would be that agenda? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to all of you who have contributed to this discussion. I think that's a very good question to end up on. So if you don't reverse the question this time around, you just stick to the order which they were asked. I think it would be a good way for you to run up a discussion in terms of, if you were to craft the national agenda, what are the things that we should be prioritizing as the nations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. I will take orders from you. If I were a soldier, I would have done very well, respecting command. My sister, you have asked very critical questions relating to schools. And as you were asking those questions, I was reminded of two things. One is Chapter 2 of the Constitution on the Bill of Rights. And the other one was the 1996 Schools Act. There are a lot of things that happened in those documents. At the time, the decision was right. But then the question is, almost 30 years down the line, are those decisions still right? If the answer is in the affirmative, then well and good, but I'm disappointed with the results. If the answer is in the negative, why can't we go back and then review that? Those of you who work with policies, we know the policy side, what stages you have to go through. Some are placed at 5 stages, others 8, others 11, but the common denominator is there is a policy need. Then you formulate a policy, and then you adopt it, you implement it, you review it. Now, the same applies with the Constitution. The Constitution, when it was adopted, the preliminary one, that is the interim Constitution of 1993, and then subsequently, the Constitution adopted in 1996, these documents were crafted in a particular political context. So when the context has changed, is it still right to retain the Constitution in its current form? Last year, DDP and the center that I represent wanted to stage a public debate on the need for a constitutional review, but we only managed to do one part, that is the Electoral Act. And we did it very well. I don't need an external assessment for that. We did it very well. I say you're going The reason why we wanted to have a look at this is because we're saying some of the things that decisions we took then are no longer applicable now. Like the issues that my sister is talking about, that bullying and pregnancy, you can reflect that on both these documents, the Bill of Rights and then the 1996 Schools Act. Then coupled with that, you ask the question, what role does LO play in school? Because at some point we used to have career guidance, which was directed at helping our kids know what they are going to do when they leave school. Then we came up with LO. And unfortunately, no matter how many marks you score, you can score level 7, which is the highest that I know of. When you come to us, the tertiary institutions, we don't count that. So what's the use? You will hear somebody say, I have 31 points minus LO, then it comes to 20 something. So what's the use? So there are certain critical questions that we need to ask ourselves to be able to help my sister with the questions it's asking relating to bullying and pregnancy. Because sometimes when we misinterpret the rights that are accorded to us by the Constitution, we no longer look at the rights of the other person who happens to be a victim. So there is more education that needs to happen there. And if there are gaps in our Constitution and of course in other pieces of legislation, then we have to go back and revisit that and then do things right. That's the only way we can get rid of this menace that is causing havoc. Then you make an important point about the role of our religious sector. I'm not surprised that most of our churches, most of our pastors are silent on political issues.
Right.
The majority of them don't care about you and they care about money. I'm sorry to say that, but that's a fact. Ask yourself, why do we have 10 churches in a 3-story building? Why can't they come together? The same question you're asking politicians. It's because if I'm a pastor, I'm going to earn money and a lot of money.
Yes.
And some pastors will tell you that for a consultation, you must pay anything between 1,000 and 3,000. I made some pastors angry in one event when I said, I don't want a labor program. And you say to me, I must go to a pastor, talk to a pastor, and then divulge all my secrets. Then the pastor is going to intercede on my behalf. Why? Because I have a direct line to God. Why can't I pay for myself? So the reason why our churches have become inactive is because they are no longer concerned about issues of society. Traditional leaders and churches were meant to be the guardians of society. Whenever things went wrong, these are two institutions that were important. They are no longer important in some instances, as some traditional leaders are, but even though there are problems there too, but not in the same magnitude as in churches. Money counts. If I can make money, then it's okay. I don't care about the next person. So that would be my answer. Then, I like this guy. And the better audience comes up with very interesting stuff. It raises a critical point, however, that of ignoring the youth, which is the same point my sister and I have been making, that it's very dangerous to leave the youth behind, because these are the people who are the future of this country. The moment you leave them behind, and then you go to crowd parliament with people with an average age of 65, then the majority of them are not going to make it in the next administration, because even if they are there, they're just there to make up the numbers. They have no contribution. Now the question is, if we're serious about what they call intergenerational mix on paper, why can't you see it in practice? Starting at the municipal level, provincial level, the national level, we should have that. In East Africa, they said you cannot learn how to swim by watching people jump into the pool. You have to jump into the pool, get someone help you, and then get the tricks, how it is done, and then you'll be okay. But then these youngsters are left out there. We only need them during voting time. Then we remember where they are, which institution they crowd, and we go and access them. But then after that, we forget about them. So the point is well taken. If we leave the youth behind, there's a recipe for disaster for this country and for the continent, I dare say. And then I'll leave the other part of crime, then my sister will talk to them. And the last question. I think I agree that the EFF will definitely do something. This decision that the EFF, the 6 members of the EFF must not attend parliament, they've been sanctioned and they are not going to be paid, it's not going to make any difference, honestly. Because these are not the only people who speak on behalf of the EFF. So there will definitely be commotion in Parliament. Albeit for a very short time, because seemingly they've just adopted the rules, new rules of Parliament. I don't know whether it's like the Sobogo clause, these ones are meant for EFF. But I heard the presiding officer saying that they are not meant for the EFF, but the rules will be tough and security will be tough. But indeed, the EFF is going to act. That's a fact. Then the main question then is what conversations should the country have? In other words, what should be on the agenda? Our national agenda, for me, the first one will be to revisit our constitution. We should call for a constitutional review, not a constitutional amendment. We've been doing constitutional amendment, amending here and amending there. We need a constitutional review because this constitution was crafted in a particular political context, and that context has changed to a very large extent. So we need to revisit it. That is why our constitution, by the way, is held in high esteem internationally. When in fact some people from inside are saying that no, this constitution is not helping us. Because there are a number of things they've seen that are not taking us to where we want to go. So for that reason, the national agenda for me will be to have a look at a relook at the constitution. And then number two, we need political education. This is looking at all levels. Whether talking about the youth, they will be busy on social media, which is fine, but you can make them use social media in a positive manner. They can do that within a minute, then the information is all over. But then serious stuff, not just gossip and all those kinds of things. So we need to have a conversation, but we need political education. I was talking to my sister here, asking who is teaching this Oliver Tambo School of Leadership? Because that is where we should start. If we have institutions like that, like those, we should ask ourselves the question, are they giving us what we expect? If the answer is in the negative, then we have to do one of two things. One is we change those who are teaching, or we close them all together. Because if they're not taking you to where you want to go, then what, on which grounds are you keeping them? So the point therefore is, unless your political education is a problem, the reason why I keep referring to the constitutional review is because at the moment, you cannot stop anyone from forming a political party, which is why we have over 350 political parties as you speak right now. We cannot stop anyone until such time that you have a constitutional review, which will change that a chapter or section would say that everyone has a right to form a political party, and everyone has a right to belong to any political party. Until you change that, you're not going to stop anyone. So we see these parties much forming, others literally spoiling votes. They know they're not going to win even a single seat, but they will do it anyway. And constitutionally, we can't stop them because legally they have a right to exist. So those are the kinds of things that you have to do, but not in a confrontational manner. You put facts on the table. This is where we started. This is how far we've gone. These are the problems we're encountering. On the basis of these problems, these are the proposals I'm putting on the table. Then we can together have a conversation and take this country forward. Over to you, sister.
Thank you so much. I sort of get to have the last word, so that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for raising the questions around schooling and the education system. I would say very boldly that the primary and secondary schooling system in our country is a disaster, unfortunately. And it's collapsed in many ways because, I mean, when you, for example, observe the Minister of Basic Education and these wonderful galas that they have saying, oh, we have an 80% plus pass rate, and you know this province has improved in terms of its matric output, etc., etc. For me, as an educator at university level, what comes through from high school level to university is a real indicator of the reality of what's happening with our country and the young people, because that pass rate is actually, you know, it's a sort of life, I can use that word, you know, it's sort of, it masks the reality of what is actually happening, because the way that the courses or the subjects that you're supposed to pass and the percentages that are kind of calculated in order for you to have a bachelor pass or this pass, that pass. It's all kind of crafted to give the impression that we have a really highly educated cohort of young people that, when they start school 12 years before and when they end off, this has been the kind of success rate. But in reality, it's all, I think, just a lie. And we have to accept that. A lot of school-going, children drop out because they cannot continue with the schooling for various reasons. A lot of them suffer with a range of social issues. And we've seen an increase in these problems at school, like bullying and teenage pregnancies and so on, because it's a reflection of what's happening in broader society. Whether it's the case that young people or children are not getting the kind of parenting that they should be getting. Our moral kind of framework has also collapsed in so many ways. So young people are not having, the kind of attention and care, whether it's from parents or from teachers, that they should be having. Therefore, we have the kind of, situation that we have. And I mean, I don't think that it's a totally lost cause. We do need to go back to basics and fix things. There were some things that happened early on in our sort of democracy or our transition to democracy, which I think were problematic. For one, the closure of the teacher training colleges that created problems in terms of, the way in which teaching happens at schools. The outcomes-based education, which was supposed to have accomplished certain things, but it didn't necessarily go the way it should have. So there were some things that happened, and these are the consequences. The rest of them, the violence that we see, in my day when I was schooling, I should give my age away, but if a teacher looked at you and a parent looked at you, they just gave you a look. We were raised in a different way.
Yeah.
And you just obeyed. They would put the fear of God in you in a way that didn't require violence or any other kind of care. So it's a different generation of young people who don't listen to adults. And maybe it's because of the way in which they are socialized or what's happening around them. Children very often get left alone. And unfortunately, it's because parents have to go to work. They get left alone to fend for themselves. They may encounter other adults that, take them down the wrong path. So we have a serious problem in terms of young people and school-going age children who are not being taken care of. And that's where I think the sort of the various government departments that deal with those things have to actually fix the problem. They shouldn't be spending so much money on all those gala dinners and what have you to showcase the outcomes, the so-called outcomes of every matric year. They should be taking those funds and investing it in another way to fix the problems at grassroots. So that's what I think in terms of the education. In terms of the religious sector, yes, I agree that whichever faith it may be, and I am from the Muslim faith, we don't have enough input from the religious sector in terms of our social issues that we encounter, especially in terms of political issues. What I found is, for example, in the last couple of years, if there's a major social challenge that emerges, for example, when we went through that phase of xenophobia, if you recall, and the heightened incidences of xenophobia, then I saw, for example, the churches perhaps coming in, intervening, trying to mediate, do things like that. But it tends to only happen in situations of extreme crisis. The churches, the mosques, the synagogues, the religious leaders should be involved consistently. Their programs at their institutions should actually include, socioeconomic issues on an ongoing basis. And they should be part of these ongoing conversations, dialogues with the government and so on. The government, whenever it has national ceremonies and events, it calls all the religious leaders to open with prayers and to close with prayers. And that's great. But I think that the religious sector should be more involved because that's a space which actually shapes society to a significant degree. A lot of what is happening in society is because of the values that people are picking up in their particular religious communities. If you go to mosque, you know, this is what you hear the imam saying, for example. Or if you go to church on a Sunday, you know, the pastor priest is saying whatever. More political and more, I think, socioeconomic sermons should actually be used. I think in terms of the issue of the question asked by the young man, what kind of country are we living in? It's a very good question, because I think it kind of encompasses the whole range of things that we need to look at. It's true that young people are not necessarily being catered for as they should be by political parties. What political parties are looking for is their votes, right? So you give us your vote, but we don't necessarily have a kind of comprehensive program of action to help you. So what did the EFF do? It realized that, for example, the ANC's Youth League had kind of really almost collapsed. So there was a huge gap there to attract young people. So what did it do? It kind of put out this message of, well, we are these young people, and try to get the angry young Black person. And I use the word angry in the way that, okay, people are upset about their social situation. So the AFF was able to attract very quickly these disaffected young people who perhaps don't have jobs, they don't have opportunities and so on, to a space. And so, of course, all the sort of things that they do, you know, what they call spectacle at their rallies. They give out T-shirts, they do this whole kind of military type of singing and dancing and all of that. That to some degree appeals to people. But then these youngsters go back home to their social realities, but what do they go back home to? Well, the leadership of the EFF go back to their very nice homes and, you know, all of that. So unfortunately, most of the political parties that exist today, and I hope some party like Rise and Zanzi will be different, because it is speaking to young people and it's doing some radical things. So I see some slight shifts, but I think, yeah, unfortunately, most young people, I mean, most political parties are not necessarily addressing the concerns of youngsters as they should be. And, you know, I've said a lot about crime already, I won't focus more on that. In terms of what kind of conversation should we be having and what would be on the agenda, in addition to what Becky has said about reviewing the Constitution and so on, I think we need to focus more on public participation by citizens. You spoke about political education. That's very essential. I think that we don't have enough of that. And that then links to what I'm saying about public participation and the kind of political culture that we have in this country. We might talk about politics, but it is perhaps not in the sort of organized, structured way that we should be talking about it. To what degree are we involved in the sort of activities of our city? I mean, you know, we criticize what the municipality is doing, but to what extent are we engaging publicly around the systems that exist, you know, the public participation systems? What I have observed is that more and more citizens are stepping into the gap that is created by the lack of service delivery. So for example, where the municipality is supposed to be providing water and electricity and so on, and it's not doing that, I'm finding that citizens are actually doing the work, if I can put it like that, of municipalities. They're trying to fix the problems that exist out there. Where there's potholes, citizens are going and taking a sort of cement and filling potholes when that is the job of the municipality. So what we're seeing is there is citizen participation in some way, but I think it needs to sort of be directed where you're actually engaging in public participation, where you are going to, for example, the meetings that your municipality holds on the budget, you attend all of the different, sort of spaces that where government and local government are meeting. So you can actually challenge them. And also you educate yourself about what exists in terms of local government. There are a lot of our citizens who don't know how our government works, how local government works, and that's a huge gap. And that may also be a language issue because, sometimes you have to translate a lot of these documents into the different languages. But that is what I would put on the agenda, public participation and changing our political culture. We have a very violent political culture, unfortunately. We need to move away from violence to a political culture that is engaging, that yes, can be robust, but we need to, like, so for example, tomorrow the EFF is gonna do what it does. Okay, fine. I mean, it's part of its, sort of way of engaging. But do we really need that? Can we not have a kind of point at which you can have your State of the Nation address just delivered, even if you're not happy with it, but without all of this violence and whatever else? So we need to change the way in which our political culture works. And for that, we need to also get our people, our youngsters to read and to be involved in more kind of intellectual activity, where they're not just sort of thinking instinctively or just reacting to things, but they are engaging in careful thought that is based on political ideas. I mean, I guess because I'm a political scientist, I complain all the time that our students don't read. So creating a political culture based on, a more educated citizenry, more public participation, because once you have people who are engaging as citizens, then you're going to change. We can't actually, as much as we'd like to, we can't leave everything up to our government, and that's a reality. Our citizens have to have a role. They have to be involved in changing the society that we are living in. So that's where I'd like to leave it at. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for Dr. Nadia. And then a final round of applause for yourselves. Thank you so much for your participation. We hope to see you in our engagement that will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. I think very soon we'll be launching an exciting project for the elections around election observation. And we're also going to be launching a number of other interventions related to the manifesto launches for the different political parties, and we hope to have you in each of those spaces. Please feel free to reach out to us on social media and say hi. Great conversation. Continue or don't continue, whatever it is that you feel you want to say evaluatory. Of course, then we would like to offer you a small bite to eat in the panini, which is essentially, where we had teas and coffees, there's a door there, and you just go in there and you have something to eat. Otherwise, travel safe and be well. Thank you very much.
También.
Yeah, no, sometimes